and cooling. We've got a lot of really good insulation and a new electric car. We've got really good seals around all the doors and windows, rainwater collection for our garden, a battery to store solar power. If you don't have the capacity to install solar yourself, like you're a renter or you don't have the right kind of roof space, you can still be renewably powered. All you have to do is make sure that when you buy electricity from your power company, that you're buying renewable electricity.
Moorlanders, we know you've had enough of dump rubbish. It's messy, disruptive, unsafe, and it's illegal. Yes, dumping rubbish is illegal. Last year it cost more than $1 million to pick up illegally dumped rubbish. We're using up your money and our resources every time we pick up this garbage. It's the duty of every good citizen of Moorland to report rubbish dumpers. Let us know if you see anything suspicious. Send us a photo, a registration number, or a physical description of the villain. Every small piece of information can contribute to bringing justice to our city. And as for the dumpers, know this. With the help of our community, we will find you and we will prosecute you.
The community services in Glenroy are overstretched. My sleepy little town just became a city overnight, so that's frightening.
Money rains from the sky above, but keep the change 'cause I got enough.
My husband and I have lived here for 16 years and raised 2 children here. Started with the health and community nurse. Been associated with the Glenroy Football Club since Reggie was little. The Glenroy Library has been a big part of my life. I've been there since Jimmy was little. You know, he'd go for the singing songs. Unbelievably, I did have some success in Europe. After being a singer here in Australia for probably 30 years, the song that I'd sung on 9 years ago was remixed by a French boy. It went #1 all over the world. I like Glenroy. I have everything I need here. I'm 7 minutes from the airport. The city's right there. I've got a park around the corner. I love the people at the bakery. It's a lovely community and I'm happy here. So in 5 years, the population of Glenroy is set to increase by 10%. I'm already feeling the effects of that increase. When I first moved here, there was 4 houses across the road, but now there's 17 units. There's so many families here that I've never seen, I've never met, and it would be nice if we saw each other at a community hub. That would be a lovely thing.
My name's Alex and I'm the owner of Handsome Her Cafe here in Brunswick Moorland. We wanted to first and foremost have a cafe that was going to centre women and other marginalised groups. We have a few house rules. Women have priority seating. The second one is that men are asked if they would like to pay a premium, which at the moment is 15%, which is reflective of the gender pay gap, and that is always donated to a women's charity. We want to try and reduce our waste as much as possible, so when customers come in and want to get a takeaway, they can borrow one of the mugs off the emergency mug box. It's really a place for people in the community to come together, to talk to each other and to spur some action. I'm so passionate about the community in Moorland. I believe that real change happens at the grassroots level and at the local level. For these Moorland Awards, I encourage you to nominate inspirational women in the community. We all know incredible women who are doing great things, and it's time to bring them into the limelight.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Natalie Aboud, the Mayor of the City of Moorland. I've lived in Moorland for the last 13 years or so. I'm raising 3 little boys with my husband and spend a lot of time outdoors in the local parklands. I've always been someone who's had a great interest about what's going on around me. So it sort of was a natural thing for me to put my hand up and run for council. I love the fact that you can get so heavily involved in community projects and there's lots of really active people in the community. I really love the diversity of this city. I find it fascinating that you can be alongside the creek and feel like you could be anywhere from Warrandyte to the Otways. But then you can be in a boutique looking at locally designed clothes or eating some incredible food from pretty much anywhere in the world. I'm really looking forward to developing easier ways for people to get across the city. We really need to make sure that we keep a handle on the way we manage growth, development, transport or waste. We need to make sure that life in the city gets better for the people who live here, and I do feel like it has been. We need to keep a handle on what's happening and make sure needs are being met.
I'm Jan. I live in Brunswick East and I've used Positive Charge to help me find someone to draft-proof my house. Positive Charge have been fantastic. They put me in touch with the company. I asked them to do initially the doors. Later I got them to come back and do the caulking of every gap in the house. I think it's really important to have draft-proofing done because it's one of the major ways that we lose heat from houses. I save on my gas heating, so that benefits me financially, and it's much more comfortable not having any drafts in the house. I would definitely recommend others getting it done, and in fact both of my daughters have had it done through Positive Charge at their houses and they're very happy with it.
So the Eco House was a normal suburban house. It was going to be demolished, but instead we moved it to series, and now people can visit and find out how to make their lives more sustainably. So recently we renovated the Eco House to be fully electrical. By being entirely electrical, we can power our whole house with solar power and other forms of renewable power. We've installed heat pumps for heating and cooling. We've got a lot of really good insulation and a new electric car. We've got really good seals around all the doors and windows, rainwater collection for our garden, a battery to store solar power. If you don't have the capacity to install solar yourself, like you're a renter or you don't have the right kind of roof space, you can still be renewably powered. All you have to do is make sure that when you buy electricity from your power company, that you're buying renewable electricity.
Moorlanders, we know you've had enough of dump rubbish. It's messy, disruptive, unsafe, and it's illegal. Yes, dumping rubbish is illegal. Last year it cost more than $1 million to pick up illegally dumped rubbish. We're using up your money and our resources every time we pick up this garbage. It's the duty of every good citizen of Moorland to report rubbish dumpers. Let us know if you see anything suspicious. Send us a photo, a registration number, or a physical description of the villain. Every small piece of information can contribute to bringing justice to our city. And as for the dumpers, know this. With the help of our community, we will find you and we will prosecute you.
The community services in Glenroy are overstretched.
Meeting. My name is Councillor Natalie Abood and I am the chairperson of the Council meeting for Planning and Related Matters. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional country of the Wurundjeri, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I also would like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moorland home. Members of the gallery, please note, this Planning and Related Matters meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of council. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Councillors and officers in attendance. Councillors in attendance tonight are Councillor Sue Bolton, hi. Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Jess Dorney. To my right is the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley.
Thanks.
Councillor Ali O'Farnley.
Good evening.
Councillor John Kavanagh.
Good evening.
Councillor Lambros Tapanos.
Good evening.
And Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Obviously, I'm Natalie Abood, the Mayor. The officers in attendance are the Acting Group Manager of City Development, Stephen Mallory. Back there, thank you. Acting Unit Manager of Urban Planning to my left, Robert Shatford. Principal Planner, Jackie Burnoff. The Manager of Corporate Governance, Jodie Watson. Unit Manager of Governance and Civic Protocols, Troy Delia. Team Leader Governance, Ali Brown. Governance Officer, Saskia Hunter. Apologies. I note that Councillor Martin is on approved leave of absence from Council until February 2019. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I have an apology from Councillor Davidson.
Can I move that apology be accepted?
Thank you very much. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Riley. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. If there are no further apologies, I'll now move on to the adoption of the minutes. Could I please have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of December 2018? Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon. Councillor Kavanagh seconding. Is there any debate or amendments to be made to the minutes? No. With no further debate or comments, I'll ask that the motion be put to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Declaration of interest and or conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any interest or conflict of interest to declare? No, thank you. I'd like to report that I will be declaring a conflict of interest. It's an indirect conflict of interest due to a close association in relation to report DCF 218, 844 to 846 Sydney Road, Coburg North, planning application MPS 2018-83. Prior to the consideration of this item, I will vacate the chair and ask that the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley, assumes the chair. So as there are no other conflicts of interest to declare this evening, I'd like to move on to the meeting. I wish to give you an outline of how the Planning and Related Matters meeting will run this evening. Firstly, the relevant planner will introduce the report and the officer's recommendations. Secondly, I will then give any objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern to make their submission. And finally, after this time, the applicant will be given their opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you are opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you are opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns? Please use this opportunity to focus your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note that there is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. So now we'll move on to the presentation of reports. The first report that we have this evening is DCF 119, 16 Beath Street, Brunswick, planning application MPS 2018-408. And I'll move to the officers to present the report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Do I need to press this?
No.
No, thank you. Sorry. So this is an application for 16 Beath Street in Brunswick. The site and the surrounding properties are within a mixed-use zone and are also affected by the Development Contribution Plan overlay and the Design and Development overlay Schedule 18. From a strategic point of view, the site is located within the Brunswick Activity Centre and the Design and Development overlay seeks an overall height of 17 metres for the property with street wall heights which match the road widths, which differ from approximately 11 metres in Beath Street to 12 metres in Moore. There's no side sets or rear setbacks specified. So you can see on the aerial here, the site is currently vacant and the surrounding area really is mixed in its nature. So we have some industrial and warehouse type properties as well as older residential development and newer double-storey construction to the south. So here on the right, just some photos of the site itself. It's been vacant for some time. On the east side of Beath Street, you can see some older dwellings here. In fact, two of those dwellings are undergoing some extensions at the moment. This is an older photograph, and then the warehouse across the road. On Lob Street, there's a turn of the century dwelling at number 33 Lob Street, and then the newer development. The proposal is to construct a 5-storey building accommodating 8 dwellings and a commercial premises. At the ground floor level, this would involve the commercial premises and some car parking and access to the dwellings. First floor, there's 3 dwellings, 2 at the second, 2 at the third, and then 1 at the final level. In terms of notice, the area that we notified, the properties that we notified are shown in orange on the map. We received a total of 13 objections, with issues raised being in relation to the height of the proposed construction on the boundary, impacts on amenity for the surrounding properties, and also a concern in relation to the number of car parking spaces provided. Talking to the permit applicant about concerns, and also discussion about internal referral comments from our ESD and admin design units. Discussion plans have been submitted. These changed some of the fenestration at the front of the building, so you can see the comparison between that and the earlier perspective is a lot more openness to the roofing of the balconies here, some softer treatment of the facade here, and some changes to the presentation of the entry. It also changed the layout of dwelling 401, which is the top floor dwelling, to improve the amenity of future residents of that dwelling, and removed a rain garden that had previously been there, and put in some alternative stormwater treatment measures to make sure that compliance is still achieved with the storm rating. Council's considered the application, and the key considerations were that its level of compliance with the design and development overlay is high. It is compliant with clause 58 of the Moreland Planning Scheme, including amenity for neighbours and future residents, and we're satisfied with the car parking. We recommend approval subject to conditions, with the key condition being the formal substitution of the advertised plans with the discussion.
Thank you. Are there any objectors or submitters who would like to speak? Yeah. So I'll let you guys work out in which order you'd like to come forward, but feel free to approach the lectern and state your case. Thank you.
I have written this out, and I think that I will be covering a lot of the points that will be covered by other objectors. So if it's taking too long, I'll abbreviate.
Yep. I just need your name and your...
I'm Alexandra Skepsy. I'm the owner of 22 Beath Street.
Thank you.
My number one objection is the size of the building. It's simply far too big for this site. Whilst I recognise that it's in the mixed-use zone and reflects Brunswick's vision for higher density living along the activity corridor, this apartment complex does not respect the nature of the block it is on. Our entire block consists of only single-storey residences, with the 2 at 18 and 20 Beath Street soon to be rebuilt as double-storey townhouses. It is inappropriate to build an apartment complex of 5 storeys on this block. This is completely out of character with the nature of all the surrounding properties on our block. The factories across the road on B Street are more appropriate for such developments, as are other areas with huge industrial sites, warehouses or factories, or if we were to sell up our entire block. The nature and character of this small block of small houses needs to be respected and preserved. It is not appropriate to simply build 5-storey apartments anywhere in this zone simply because policy states. They must still fit in with the surrounding nature of the residences and character of the immediate vicinity. The lifestyle of property owners in the vicinity also need to be respected and represented by council. We are not simply markings on a map. We are humans who have invested greatly in our properties. These are our homes. We don't want to be pushed out of our homes or our street because of policy and, unattractive buildings being built that impact greatly on our lifestyles. This complex will loom large over the four properties to the north of it on B Street, and indeed to all those on the east on Lob Street. This will have a huge impact on our private open spaces as it towers over us and on the windows and light access at number 18 B Street and 33 Lobb Street. I believe there are windows on the west side of 33 Lobb Street. The plans for 16 B Street proposes to build right up to these windows, blocking out all light and view. This will significantly affect the quality of life in the surrounding neighbours and will have a huge and negative impact on the value of our properties. These apartments and retail site would also add another 18 bins to the narrow footpaths on bin day, which end up being dropped on the path by the bin trucks and completely blocking the path for pedestrians, which is particularly difficult when pushing a pram, using a wheelchair, for the elderly or for kids riding bikes or scooters. This is already a problem on B Street. 3 stories should be the absolute maximum height on this block. Inadequate parking. The plans propose stackable parking for only 6 parking spaces as opposed to the council recommendations of 14. This is unacceptable. 8 apartments with 15 bedrooms and a retail or commercial site need provisions for much more parking spaces than 6. People have cars. The statistics on the traffic report show clearly that the majority of residents in 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments own a car, and this does not take into consideration the retail space.
You've just got to 3 minutes, so I might get you to wrap it up unless there's anything you really want to add before you move on to the next objector.
Okay, I'll go through quickly by points, if I may.
It's just that we've already gone over the 3 minutes and there's a bunch of different people to...
Okay. I want to say something important because I lived at B Street from 2001 to 2016. There was a survey taken about parking in the street, and it was taken when 16, 18 and 20 B Street were not occupied. I can attest to the fact that when those houses were occupied and 2 of the houses in the street didn't have cars, they were not drivers, you cannot park anywhere. You cannot get a park. None of us have off-street parking. There is a lot of businesses around us and warehouses, and it is impossible to find a park. We also have a factory across the road that has trucks idling all day long from Monday to Friday, and any parking space will be taken by them. They take 2 to 3 parking spaces at a time. So adding to this with, multiple more cars is going to be a massive problem for that area.
Thank you, Alexandra. I'll just have to ask the next person to come up.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. My name is George Lasinis and I live 18 B Street. Just a couple of points, and I concur with a lot of Alexandra's points. 2 points I want to raise about opposing the current design for 16 B Street is the proposed development is constructed right up to the boundary of 18B. Given the current car park design, I have concerns regarding the continuous vibration and noise disrupting the quiet enjoyment of our properties. I'm not comfortable or not assured that the neighbouring house, my house, will not experience any damage over time resulting from the vibration, including cracks, movement, and in the existing residence resulting from the continuous cars are moving around. As a recent example, we saw what happened with the Opal Tower in Sydney. The second objection I have is around the proposed threat that's introduced as a result of the high-rise. It's not uncommon for people to throw things off the balconies, and this has been recorded on numerous occasions, most recently in the Melbourne CBD in Primate Tower, where people were throwing cigarette butts down the other people's balconies and different properties. So they're my 2 concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I'll just move on to the next person who'd like to speak to the application.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Hi there, Stefan Lodewax of 12 Beath Street. Based on what people have already said, I'd like to add 2 more other concerns that I have with this development. If you look at the way that this area has been developed, smaller sites at the moment are being developed into townhouses, usually about 4 or 5 units each, maxing out at around about 3 stories. The larger buildings are being reserved for the big brown sites developments. So, for example, the Fletcher Jones factory that's on Fritz Street, I believe it is, that's being redeveloped at an upcoming time in the future. So this will put it out of character with what else is being developed of a block of that size. In addition to that, if you look at the other houses around there, they're going to be, given that the other houses on Beat Street have just been renovated or are in the process of being renovated, they're going to be around for a while. The houses I am sceptical of changing in terms of them being redeveloped into taller units over the next coming decade. So this will actually end up sticking out like a mesa on Beath Street, out of character with the rest of the street for a time. The other question that I would have about the development for which I have reservations is that of the shadowing. So the equinox diagram showed that the shadowing of the building will go as far as the garden beds of the townhouses south of the development, but nonetheless that still leaves a significant part of the year where shadows will obstruct over into the houses further on that go beyond the equinox over winter. And my concern there is that you will have houses that will be in deprivation of sunlight over the winter months, which detracts from the amenity that people were able to derive from their properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Milik and I'm from 33 Lob Street, Brunswick. I'm the daughter of the owner. She doesn't speak English, so I'm just going to go through. Alexander and the other owners have gone through most of the points, but I'm just going to go through the most important 3 points that we have been concerned about. One of them have been the shadow that's going to look over our property. We're just, our biggest concern is that it is a very old house. Probably 50, 60, even more. We can't confirm how old it is, but my parents have bought that property more than 40 years ago, and we are worried about the sunlight, which is going to be cut down to about 3 hours a day, and what's going to happen with the mold. So that was one of our concerns. The most important, our second concern was the window that's on the boundary. They are thinking of building the building on the right next to our window, which will cover that window. They have offered to put a window on the ceiling, but still that window still will be covered by the shadow of that high building, and we've only got that room just for a toddler, and we get most of that sunlight from that room and from that window. So that's very important for us. And another important fact is that the noise from the car park stacking thing. So it is all single houses, and it is old houses. So we are worried about what the damage that all those stacking will do to our properties, because the walls can crack, and then if we need to repair it, how are we going to repair it? Who will cover the costs? Because all this stacking is going to make noise, plus it's going to damage the walls of the houses. And most of the points have been gone through with our neighbour Alexander anyway. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Malik.
Thank you.
My name is Issy Scoofus. I have the house of 20 Beath Street, Brunswick. I've been there for over 40 years. I've lived in that area for 40 years. Now, I know that Alex has mentioned about the traffic. Obviously, it's a struggle already, let alone having a development like that. I'm very surprised that you sort of gave your, on a 300 square metre block, to have a 5-storey development is too much. I think when I originally had 20 and 22 Beath Street, and one of the objectives when I was trying to go for the double storey was number 16, objecting about car space. And I wasn't adding another dwelling, if you know what I'm saying. So let alone having a 5-storey place there with all these cars. It's a struggle just to move. You just got to be there day by day. That's all. I mean, everybody has mentioned the rest of the issues. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Issy.
Hi, my name's Anne Bond and I'm the owner of 30 Lob Street. And I just wanted to add something about my concerns about the design response to the context of the urban design in the area. I just found that the developer was struggling to find any guidance on the design approach. They said that there was a hint of an idea from the townhouses in Lob Street, but they got most of their strongest evidence for the character of the building was from a 72 apartment building that is on Albert Street, and that was where they got their design and their ideas from. And yet I think it's really important that you understand that that apartment building on Albert Street is part of the same development, the fabric development, that extends down to Lob Street, which is 8 years old. And the developers 8 years ago, when they were looking at designing that space, understood that they could put a higher building on Albert Street, but they would bring those the dwellings down to more of a human living space on Lob Street. In fact, those townhouses are actually 3 stories high, but from the streetscape on Lob Street, they only appear to be 2 stories. And so then when we get to this new building, all of a sudden we go up 5 stories. So I just wonder why 8 years ago, when council approved the fabric plans, they were interested in having this coming down in height from a busy pedestrian street like Albert Street to lowering the heights closer to Lob Street, and now that seems to be disregarded.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak as an objector? Thank you. Will the applicant or a representative of the applicant like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All of the objections we
Could I just have your
understand.
name? Sorry, could I have your name?
I beg your pardon, it's Peter Brown, we're architects and the applicant for
Thank you,
the
Peter.
scheme. And all of those concerns have already been addressed by council officers during the course of the process of refining the design, etc. The inappropriate 5 stories, etc., is really an argument against the council's planning scheme. We point out that what's being proposed complies with all aspects of the scheme, and that it's even encouraged in part. The car parking noise, we can assure there is no noise from the single stacker, or there will be no noise from the single stacker that will cause any inconvenience, and I can say that as an acoustic architect who designs the ABC studios, SBS, etc. But I'm happy to report that or prove that via a report. The nature of the proposal certainly does not match single-storey 200-year-old, 100-year-old residences, and that's because its intention is to meet the emerging character of the area, and for the definition of that we have relied well on council officers and urban design advice, and for which, by the way, we're most grateful and has been very thorough. The overshadowing, we believe the equinox, there is no overshadowing during the equinox, which is when we're to provide the 22nd of September. At the winter solstice, yes, there may be some, but it's likely to be not exceed the height of the existing front fences. That's to the other side of Lob Street. The boundary window is an item that's been subject to both legal and heritage attention, and is addressed very comprehensively in Council's officer report. And if there's any concern about that, and I won't reiterate the report in the interest of time, but legal and heritage advice have been taken. The window is has, we believe, no right to light and air, but from a practical point of view and out of deference to the neighbours, the proprietor has offered to install fully ventilated skylight into the single-storey roof.
Just have to ask you to wrap it up, please, Peter.
I'm sorry, Madam
I'll just have
Chair.
to ask you to wrap it up.
Yes, that's basically it. Any councillors have any queries, we'd be happy to answer them. And thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do any of you have any questions for the applicant, the objectors or the officers? Are there any questions? No. Councillor Bolton?
I'd like to ask a question of the council officer in regard to the resident who asked about the design response. Comparing this current development to this development on Albert Street, which sort of steps down quite a lot in terms of respecting the local character of the area.
So, say that the development 8 years ago predates my time at Moreland, but certainly that development is taller at Albert Street and does drop away in height as it gets further north. However, the controls in the planning scheme now, which are different to 8 years ago, do talk about having a 17-metre height. 15 metres is normally what you would say as being 5-storey, so it's just higher than 5-storey on this side and surrounding blocks.
Thank you. Councillor Dorney, did you have a question?
Applicant. So I'm just curious as to what the solar capacity on the roof of this development is, and if you're intending on installing it, because it's not present in the BESS report.
Yes, Councillor, it is intended to install solar on the roof. At the moment, I believe we have 16 panels, but further development of the detail of the ESD report, if it calls for more, then we'll happily provide it.
Okay, so that's good to know. There's currently, I think there's 11 on there, or maybe 12 on there at the moment.
Okay, I apologise for that,
okay.
But in the process of amending the drawings in accordance with council's requests, some of the detail got, shall I say, apologetically lost, and that would be reinstated. Absolutely.
All right. So given that there's space for potentially double that, would you be happy to have a condition within the conditions that...
to maximise the solar? Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Can I ask a question of the resident whose mother will lose the window?
Yes.
I was just wondering if you could say how long your mother has lived there, and has the window always been in that location, or?
That's correct. Mum bought that property more than 40 years ago.
Sorry, Malik, would you be able to approach the podium just so that everyone who's watching at home can hear your answer as well? That's okay. Thank you.
I'm sleep deprived. I'm sorry, I just had a newborn. So, Mum bought that house more than 40 years ago. 47 years ago, and that window has been there. But in 1998, I remember I was in year 12, that my father renovated that wall because it sort of crushed. It was a brick wall, so it went down. I think it's called restumping. They restumped that wall, so they renewed the frame and everything. So that's why the window looks new. However, Mum can confirm that she bought that property with that window because that window provides ventilation and sunlight to that side of the house, because there's nothing else on that side of the house except that little window. And my father, because the tenants were never safe, that was living at that 18B Street, my father have put a guard, like a grill. Like a grid, yeah, and that window never opens more than that much, which just to provide ventilation, because there's nothing else that gets into that room, because that room looks into a corridor and there's no other windows or, anything where sunlight can come in or ventilation can come in. Yeah.
Thank you, Malik.
Not a problem. Thank you. So Mum bought that property 47 years ago, and the house is probably older than that.
Yeah.
About 60, 70, don't know, can't come back.
Thank you.
100.
Sorry, I just need a bit of quiet from the gallery. Sorry. Councillor Riley.
Can we just have the officer, we've been briefed about this as councillors in the process, but can you just sum up for Councillor Bolton, who wasn't available for that, and for the people here, just as to what the legal position is and why there's been this undertaking to provide the skylight, the ventilated skylight?
Thank you.
Yes, so I've been inside the dwelling and seen the window in question. at the moment it has an aluminium frame, and I guess that goes along with it having been replaced in 1998. The legal advice that we've received is that in order for there to be rights of light and air, the window would need to have been in place before 1924, and that would need to be, the current window would have needed to be in place before 1924. But because the window has been altered, there no longer is rights to light and air for the neighbouring property. And so previous tribunal decisions then talk about the skylight option as being an alternative to, I guess, maintain that amenity.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, I can't take any more comments from the gallery unless it's an answer to a question. Are there any other councillors who would like to pose any questions? Otherwise, I need to ask for a motion from the councillors regarding this application.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from this gentleman here. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Michael DeCalcas. I'm part of the applicant. Just to elaborate in relation to this window and the site itself. The site's obviously vacant land at the moment, and what we're getting at the moment is a lot of people coming by and just dumping rubbish on the site as well. So I think it's in the council's best interest, in the community's best interest. Was this in relation to the window? I thought you were answering the question about the window. Yeah, I was going to get to that as well. Just get to that point, because we've heard already. So our family's owned the property since 1980. There's never been a window there throughout the whole time until about probably 1998, when the window was constructed by the objector's father, and it was done illegally. At the time, it was discussed with my father that the window can be there just to add a little bit of light to that room. And if ever need that the property was going to be developed, that window could be taken out and closed up. Fortunately, the applicant's, the objector's father's passed away. Now, we've been able to get a heritage consultant and everything else to show that window is never part of the original fabric of the building as well.
All right, sorry, I thought it was in relation to the offer around the solar light that Peter was talking about earlier.
Thank you,
so
Councillor.
that contradicts that.
O'Farnley, and thank you. Sorry, thank you. I think we need to move on. Thank you. Sorry about that. Just because I'm chairing the meeting, I need to make sure that we follow some kind of meeting procedure, and that is here. So I need to actually, now that this discussion, unless there are any more questions from the councillors, I need to ask for a motion regarding this application. Are there any councillors who would like to put a motion regarding this application?
I'm prepared to move the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Is there a seconder for...
Pages 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh.
I'll second.
Councillor Riley is seconding the application.
I guess maybe just a slight amendment just in relation to the question.
Would you like to propose the amendment, Councillor
Yes,
Dornies?
So just a second point E. 3E, I believe it is. Yep. Commitment to the provision of a minimum of a 6 kilowatt photovoltaic commitment to the provision. Sorry, I should stand.
Thank you.
Of a minimum 6 kilowatt photovoltaic system.
That's acceptable to me as the mover. And
yes.
Thank you, Councillors Kavanagh and Riley. Councillor Kavanagh, as the mover, would you like to speak to this application?
just briefly, look, I can understand the concern of residents, but for me, the overwhelming factor is that it is in a mixed-use zone and it does have a design and development overlay. For me, that therefore means that the application is largely compliant. The only thing that they're seeking, from what I can see as a variation, is a reduction in car parking. Remembering that car parking rates throughout the whole of Victoria and don't take into account if it's close to public transport and things of that nature. Certainly the concern about the sunlight does resonate with me, but unfortunately, although we've tried on many occasions to try and have the lighting, the protection of sunlight to be at the shortest day and at the winter solstice, unfortunately the state planning scheme is to take it at the equinox, at either the spring or the autumn equinox, and so the applicant is within within planning scheme to take that readings, which he has done so. So in essence, simply because it's in a mixed-use zone and it has the development and design overlay, and it is compliant with almost all of those, supporting the office recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to
Just
the
briefly, I
question?
think Councillor Kavanagh has covered much of it, and thank you to the objectors and the proponent for discussing those areas of concern. I think I am concerned about the overshadowing, but if it's at the solstice, it is only going to hit the fence, then I'm hoping that it won't impact largely on those properties. But as the proponent has outlined, the matter of car parking is one that we're considering under our current strategies for transport in the city and parking. And in many cases, we are trying to reduce the number of cars coming to the city by reducing the number of car parks that we're actually allocating. So we have got a congestion problem, and in the next 2 months, you're most welcome to be part of the consultation and the resolution of that. And at this stage, I'm more than comfortable to be approving a reduction in car parking, because that's where we're headed with our policies. We've been in that direction for a number of years. We have a problem with congestion, we have a problem with parking, and we are encouraging people, as Councillor Kavanagh has alluded, there's good public transport nearby. There's a train. I live just down the road from this. I rode past there this morning going to the swimming pool. I'm quite interested that no one's contacted me about this, and first I've heard about it is this evening and reading the reports. So it's quite interesting that people have got some concerns about it, but as a councillor, no one's contacted me about it, so I wasn't aware that these were concerns until tonight. I knew there'd been objections. So I think that the fact that the station is just up the road and it's getting new trees there, because I was watering them this morning, and we have trams and other transport nearby, trams and trains, I think I'm more than comfortable to have reduced the car parking for this site. In terms of the height, I think this is, as we've indicated, the proponents indicated, that it is about transitioning this area, and it is a mixed-use zone. Unfortunately, I understand the concerns, but the rules are allowing this to occur, and what we'll probably see as a result of this is more height coming to the north of this building and beyond. So I can't say that, but it's likely that's what will happen.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion? Councillor Bolton.
While it might be legal to block someone's window, I don't think it is in very good spirit of neighbourliness. It does, concern me, the phrase about this window has no right to light and air. I recently visited, or last year visited, another premises in Moreland, which is one of those old-style townhouses where there's not many windows, and someone beside them had built right up to the boundary and covered up their window. Now, it wasn't a block of flats, it was a house that was expanding, but that was the only light and air into a side of the house. And there's no way I could, in good conscience, vote for that to happen, regardless of whether it's legally allowed or not. I think it's a terrible law. And it's really, I think it is problematic that the applicant hasn't considered trying to, okay, yes, I know you've offered the skylight, but to actually, make a deliberate choice to build right up to the boundary, I think is really problematic. So I can't vote for that. I also feel, after listening to the arguments and put forward by residents, that while, we do obviously need to accommodate more people in Moreland, and therefore we do need to develop these sites, I feel that 5 stories is excessive for a site of this size with this sort of character in this area. I think, yes, it should be developed, but I would go more in the order of 3 stories, so that it's not such a wild jump up from what is in existence in the area. There might be some other points, but those are the 2 to me that make me feel that I'm not going to support this development application.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Councillors, are there any other councillors who would like to speak to the motion? Councillor Tapanos.
So I rise to support the application, the motion that's been proposed. There's a couple of things I like about this application. I like the activation on the front level, the retail activation of the site I think is going to be really good. I think some of the apartments have been well designed and they're quite spacious, and there is a good mix of twos, and I think there's some threes there as well. So I think from a design element and a livability element, that there is a lot of positives in the development. I do share some of the concerns from residents, and I think it's always difficult when an area is transitioning to greater growth. And of course, the window on the boundary, that is a concern as well. And I will urge you to take up the offer of the applicant and try to look at a sky window instead there that could open it up and provide more air and ventilation if this gets through. However, as a committee, we do make decisions based on planning laws, and it's upon us to actually look and judge this application on the planning scheme as it stands. So when we actually do that, there's minimal non-compliance, apart from car park, as Councillor Kavanagh mentioned earlier. So when we look at the heights, when we look at the design, it actually quite comes up to standard, and it actually exceeds a lot of the standards that we see in many other applications, particularly around good design for apartments. So for these reasons, I can't see a reason to reject this application. I would mention that traffic and car parking is a real concern. It's a concern across the whole city, and I guess we are dealing with those issues through developing a strategy more broadly. But of course, I would also just wanted to highlight for the residents' benefit here is that we do have a law that would mean that residents in these apartments will not be able to apply for residential parking permits. So if there are parking restrictions in the area in the future, these residents won't be eligible for that, and it's only existing residents who will be able to get a parking permit. So I think that would go a little bit of, it would certainly help a little bit with easing some of the congestion and the parking pressures in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapanos. Before I put this item to the vote, I'd just like to state my own position, which is that I disagree with Councillor Tapanos in that I don't like the development, but I do feel like I also have no way that I can reject it, because I think that what will happen is it will go to VCAT and VCAT will approve it, and it's just a waste of people's time and extra money unless you're a VCAT lawyer, I guess. And I'd like to reiterate part of what Councillor Tapanos said, which is to do with the car park waiver, because he's outlined a very clear situation which puts into context what we will be planning to do with the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy with regard to making it harder to own a car in these developments, in these streets, which will ultimately lead to less traffic in these streets. So I just wanted to reiterate that part of your statement, because I think it's quite important to keep making people understand that we are trying to limit the number of cars that exist in the city, especially in the bottom half of the city. So,
can I just say, I don't think I said I didn't like the applicated development. There's a lot of benefits to it.
No, you said you did like it. I don't agree with that part. Okay. I don't like it. So I agreed with the second part of your statement, not the first. As there's no further debate, I'll put this to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Against? Declare that carried.
Can my vote be recorded?
Yes. Could we have Councillor Bolton's vote recorded, please? Do you want your vote recorded as well? So
we'll have a division.
I'd like to have a division on that vote. So all those in favour again, please. Councillors Yildiz, Tapanos, Kavanagh, Bolton, Riley.
No, I'm not in favour.
Sorry. Abood. Look up my name. Abood, Riley, Dorney and Carly Hannon. And against? Councillors Afanley and Bolton. I'll now pass to the officers to outline what will happen next.
So, following today, a notice of decision to grant a permit would be issued and sent to all parties by mail. That allows objectors 28 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT if they wish. The applicant, upon looking at the conditions, might choose to appeal conditions, in which case they get 60 days.
Thank you. I'll now move to the next item. I need to declare a conflict of interest, DCF 218, and I need to vacate the chair. I need to state the nature of the conflict is an indirect conflict of interest. Although I attended the PID on New Year's Day, I discovered that a close friend of my sister-in-law's works for the applicant, so I don't feel that I can be involved in making a decision. And I'm declaring a conflict with that in mind. In keeping with 16.2 of the Meeting Procedure Local Law, which we adopted and was gazetted on the 21st of June 2018, I will now pass to ask Councillor Riley to take the chair and proceed with the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Riley.
Thank you. I'm just trying to find the... Please bear with me. I'm just having a little technical difficulty on my own iPad. I think it's coming good though. Thank you. So Natalie's agenda. So we're actually up to item number 2, which is DCF 2/19. That's 844 to 846 Sydney Road, Coburg North. Planning application NPS /2018/83. And I think we go to the officer for the report. Thank you.
So this is an application to redevelop what's known as the Stay-In Motel in Coburg North. The site is an unusual T-shape arrangement, and with the majority of it being in a mixed-use zone, but the northern section fronting onto Golleen Street being in a general residential. It's covered by a number of overlays, including the environmental audit overlay, a parking overlay. A section at the front of the site is set aside for public acquisition by Vic Road widening. A permit's also required to change access points onto Sydney Road under clause 5229 and for car parking. From a strategic perspective, the site is not located within a designated activity centre, so it's identified for incremental change. And state and local policy also talks about supporting investment for tourism, particularly where you've got proximity to public transport. This aerial shot shows the surrounding area with a fairly traditional single-storey residential streets in Golleen Street and Bakers Road, with more robust development along Sydney Road and certainly a lot of traffic. The tram line finishes on the southern side of Bakers Road. You can just see that at the base of the photo. At present, the front section of the building isn't operational, so the former restaurant, although the motel behind is in use, presents a fairly blank car access to Bakers Road. Golleen Street, the land is vacant at the moment. You can see the lower photograph there is just looking through the transparent section of fence. The time I visited, there was a lot of debris from the construction site next door on that. The southern side of Golleen Street, as I said, you've got single-storey dwellings, the sort of brick post-war dwellings, and the house shown in the top photograph is the house next door. And this the lower photograph is the new development on the northeastern corner of Sydney Road and Golleen Street. In the report, I've divided the consideration of the building up into the 3 forms of the building. So it's proposed to replace the existing motel restaurant with a 4-storey 29-bed motel, which the report calls the Sydney Road building. It's proposed to alter the existing motel to provide 21 apartments with pedestrian access off Bakers Road, which is what I've called the Bakers Road building. With the exception of a small drop-off pickup area within Sydney Road, all the car parking access for the 3 buildings would be off Bakers Road, just to the right of the building here. And then to Golleen Street, it's proposed to construct 6 apartments in a double-storey building facing Golleen Street, which The site was subject to a previous planning application and appeal that was ultimately refused both by council and Merri-bek. The key differences between the two proposals were that previously a 3-storey flat roof building was proposed to Goleen Street, and the upper level in the Sydney Road building was set significantly closer to the street and was a lot flatter. You can see the area marked in blue in this instance is the people that we notified. This person sitting outside here was an objector to the previous application, so we ensured that we went to the surrounding properties but also people who'd been previously involved. We received 11 objections. The main issues raised included the expansion of concern about potential expansion of the existing use of the premises, the appearance of the buildings, car parking and overlooking. We held a planning information discussion meeting on the 20th of November, and certainly the majority of the discussion was around existing concerns about the existing operation and the potential for the current client mix to continue on with the proposal. Following the information discussion meeting and due to that discussion, we had some discussions with the permit applicant and ultimately circulated a draft motel guest management plan, or we called it at that time a venue patron management plan, which sought to put in some controls in place around behaviour of patrons. The applicants indicated a willingness to abide by that condition. I've received some correspondence back from objectors, but no one withdrawing on the basis of the condition. Looking at our assessment, we are happy that the presentation to Sydney Road and Goleen Street addresses concerns that both council and Vic had previously in relation to those aspects of the proposal. And Vic Roads are happy with the access to Sydney Road. Looking at it, we believe that conditions are appropriate in relation to car parking and also compliance with clause 58, including amenities for neighbours and future residents. So looking at it, we're recommending approval subject to conditions. Key conditions are looking for amended plans to allocate more of the car parking to the motel and to provide more space for vehicles to turn and pass one another within the car parking areas. An increase in the setback of the first floor of the Goleen Street building to Unit 3 of Bakers Road, which I'll speak back up. There's 3 units at 34 Bakers Road. The rear one doesn't enjoy the level of sunlight access to its open space that Res Code would require, and so we really don't want to see an increase in shadow to that open space area. What we found is that by reducing the length of dwelling 6 within the Goleen Street building, so that's the upper right corner if you like, looking at the plans, if we reduce that in length by 3 metres, then we ensure that there won't be any increase in shadow to there's been some screening of overlooking both internally and to neighbouring properties. There needs to be some fine-tuning of that, and you'll see there's a number of conditions relating to improving the usability of living areas within the Bakers Road apartments. And then the other thing is that the requirement for a motel guest management plan has continued across with the wording that matches what we've seen.
Thank you. Are there... Thank you, Robert. Where are we up to? So yes, that's what I was going to ask for. Are there any objectors or submitters who wish to speak to this application? A submitter? Are there any objectors present? No, so if there are no objectors, then we'll go to the applicant. Well, you're a representative of the applicant. Oh, sorry, Nick.
Could I submit? Oh, no. Yes.
Yes, not too late to have someone come and speak.
I won't discuss the nuts and bolts of this building. I'll discuss its use. Its use is it has been used by, particularly by homelessness services, halfway facility, etc., etc. There is a massive shortage, as you know, of housing throughout Melbourne. Why aren't these homeless people anywhere else? They can't afford anywhere else. There's not enough public housing. There's not even enough caravan parks. Caravan parks are more expensive than these motels. These people have nowhere else to go. These people are often in crisis, and this sometimes leads to, you have a building full of people in crisis, you sometimes have overflow effects to neighbouring properties. This applicant has agreed to a motel guest management plan. This application also has residential properties within the development. In other words, neighbours of the motel will be present within the same complex. They will be passively monitoring the situation in the motel. I think this is a very good development. I think it's an appropriate development, and I think the motel guest management plan will allay all neighbours' problems. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Dolby. If there are no other objectives, we'll get the have the applicant or representative applicant come to the podium. Thank you. If you just state your name and thanks.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, councillors and council officers. My name is Angelo Paolini. I'm the architect for this development. I'm representing both the owner and also I have a brief statement from the planner who was involved, our planner who was involved in the application, Eddie Zagami, who both were unable to attend tonight's meeting. So we go. We thank you for the opportunity to speak in favour of the application. We have worked in consultation with the council officers since receiving a request for further information. There have been significant changes to the built form and design, largely from feedback by council's urban designers, which has now resulted in an improved built form outcome in terms of materials and articulation to the Sydney Road for frontage and the scale and setbacks to Goleen Street. In particular, Sydney Road, we reduced the setback on the upper level by quite significantly from the original application, something in the order of about 4.8 metres on the upper level, so it's pushed back and we were able to achieve a better sight line from the opposite side of Sydney Road, giving the impression that it's much smaller than what it was originally. We also broke up the facade treatment of the Sydney Road facade, simplified it, and in conjunction with discussions we had with the urban planner at the time at council, we adjusted the Goleen proposal for the apartment there by removing a level and reducing or increasing setbacks from Goleen and increasing setbacks from the adjoining single-storey dwelling to the residential side. The amendments have resulted in the urban design unit supporting the application together with all other council departments and Vic Rose as set out on page 54 of the officer's report. We have reviewed the officer's report and we are pleased with the extent of detail and further changes sought by way of permit conditions. It has been a great opportunity for us to embrace the feedback that residents provided council through advertising of the application, which resulted in additional conditions, in particular the management plan condition. We view this condition as providing both council and residents with an additional level of comfort about the future operation on the site, and we encourage councillors to adopt the officer's report and recommendation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Angelo. Stay there. We might just see if there are any questions. So, councillors, do you have any questions to put to the officers or the applicant or any of the objectors? There being none, so thank you. Thank you. There are no questions. So, councillors, if there are no further questions, could I please have a motion?
I'm happy to move the officer recommendation on page 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47.
It's a long motion. Thank you.
I can second.
And we'll keep on going. Yep.
Councillor Kavanagh, and we have a seconder with Councillor Bolton.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Does the mover wish to speak?
Just briefly. Yes, I think actually the objector summarised my feelings in many ways there. It is an important facility. I understand concerns of local residents, but I remember when I first got elected to council, we had the application in Munro Street, and there were objector concerns at that time for a similar type of facility. And in fact, in the intervening number of years on council, I haven't heard any complaints of the nature that were outlined on that night. It was a bit different to tonight. We had a gallery full of people, neighbours, etc., being really disappointed that council was going to approve something of that nature. But as I said, the feelings of concern there haven't materialised, and it's with confidence that I think it won't here either. Of course, it's important that we do have these facilities and that these facilities are close to public transport. So it fulfills that criteria, and so I think anyone who's driven past the site realises that it needs renovation, it needs improvement, and so my view is that the sooner that this can be acted upon and implemented, the better for the potential residents, but also the better for our community.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly. I think it's good that the applicant has taken on board some of the original objectors' concerns. I actually think when the site is revamped, it will be better, and I actually think maybe there might be some problems, but I think overall my impression of the site at the moment is it's quite run down, and I think it will be better having having this new construction on the site. I also certainly support the use. I'd rather see permanent housing provided to people, but this is one of only two places that does provide emergency accommodation in Moreland, like only two. So, I certainly support the continuation of the provision of emergency housing. But yeah, I think it will, the overall impact of the redevelopment of the site will be better for residents than the current situation.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to the motion? As there aren't, I'd just like to add to my comments to that and thank Mr Dolby for raising the issue around the crisis accommodation nature of the current use of there, and I think Councillor Kavanagh and Bolton have also addressed that. I think this is a big issue for our community, and I'm not sure that these kinds of projects should actually be used to fix that problem. I think they're issues that we are undertaking and we have undertaken through advocacy, and we're also trying to address through the Housing Trust, which we just recently established. So I'm hoping they might be a little bit more rigorous in the way they do that. But I do agree with Councillor Bolton's comments that this building or the renovation will still be an important potential accommodation for people for short-term accommodation if they are facing homelessness. So, but nevertheless, it'll be a much better form of accommodation they're currently getting there. So, and I think the issues that we're facing, often being addressed there on a daily, weekly basis, might drop away during the construction, and hopefully with the new design and the layout of the place, that it might actually mean that there are fewer problems between the residents in those locations and so on. So that's my wish. I will yet to see whether that comes into fruition. So if there being no further debate, I'd like to put the motion. So all those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Does the officer needs to now declare the next steps in the process? Thank you.
So as with the previous application, a notice of decision to grant a permit would be issued and posted to all parties. That allows objectors 28 days to appeal to VCAT should they wish, and the applicant 60 days if they've got condition.
Thank you. Item number 6 on the agenda is urgent business. There being no urgent business items to consider tonight, that concludes the business for tonight. Councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming at home, I declare the council meeting for planning related matters closed at, let me get the time, 7:37 p.m. Thank you for your attendance and have a very good New Year, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name's Alex and I'm the owner of Handsome Her Cafe here in Brunswick Moorland. We wanted to first and foremost have a cafe that was going to centre women and other marginalised groups. We have a few house rules. Women have priority seating. The second one is that men are asked if they would like to pay a premium, which at the moment is 15%, which is reflective of the gender pay gap, and that is always donated to a women's charity. We want to try and reduce our waste as much as possible, so when customers come in and want to get a takeaway, they can borrow one of the mugs off the emergency mug box. It's really a place for people in the community to come together, to talk to each other and to spur some action. I'm so passionate about the community in Moorland. I believe that real change happens at the grassroots level and at the local level. For these Moorland Awards, I encourage you to nominate inspirational women in the community. We all know incredible women who are doing great things, and it's time to bring them into the limelight.